The screen of my phone lit up with a notification that changed everything. It was a panoramic photo posted by my brother Julian in our extended family group chat, a digital space shared by over 30 aunts, uncles, and cousins. The image showed a sprawling, pristine colonial estate in a wealthy suburb, complete with a manicured lawn and a sparkling pool. Beneath the photo, Julian had written a long, self-congratulatory paragraph. After years of pure sacrifice and solo grit, Vanessa and I have finally built our empire. Hard work always pays off. Proud to show what happens when you commit to success entirely on your own. Within seconds, the chat flooded with praise from my parents. So proud of our brilliant boy, my mother typed. A true leader, my father added. I sat at my kitchen table looking at the screen, feeling an icy, calm clarity wash over me. I didn't type an angry message. I didn't scream. Instead, I uploaded a single professionally formatted PDF file titled Itemized Childcare Services and Operational Reimbursement, 2021 to 2026. Beneath the file, I typed a single public response. Congratulations on the new house, Julian. Since you clearly possess ample liquidity, I expect full payment of the attached $48,500 invoice for 2,425 hours of uncompensated childcare within 30 days, as detailed by your written requests and verified luxury vacation records. My name is Elena. I am 32 years old and I work as a corporate compliance auditor. For nearly a decade, my family treated me as a designated scapegoat, an unpaid domestic servant whose sole purpose was to fund the golden child's luxury lifestyle. But they didn't know that my quiet nature masked a sharp, professional skill set that would eventually dismantle their lies. Before we dive into how that single invoice completely shattered their carefully constructed world, if you value stories about setting deep boundaries, standing up to toxic family dynamics, and reclaiming your self-worth, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your support allows me to share these deeply personal testimonies of healing and justice. The deafening silence that followed my message in the group chat was the first time in my life I felt truly powerful. But to understand how a sister reaches the point of billing her own brother, and why this invoice was legally ironclad, I need to take you back to the beginning. Growing up, our household was governed by a strict, unspoken hierarchy established by our parents, Richard and Martha. Julian was the older brother, the golden child who could commit no wrong. I was the younger sister, the systematically ignored daughter whose achievements were treated as mere expectations. When Julian scored a basic goal in a high school soccer game, my parents hosted a celebratory dinner. When I graduated at the top of my class and secured a full academic scholarship to college, my mother simply looked up from her tablet and said, "Well, that saves us some money we can put toward Julian's business school fund." This toxic dynamic didn't fade with time. It hardened into an absolute reality as we transitioned into adulthood. Julian married Vanessa, a woman who shared his obsession with public status, and they quickly had two beautiful children, Leo and Maya. The moment my niece and nephew were born, my parents unilaterally decided what my role would be. My mother sat me down in her living room, looked at my modest one-bedroom apartment and my early career milestones, and stated plainly that it was my sacred duty as an aunt to support Julian's growing family. Because I was single, had no children of my own, and was completely focused on building my career in corporate compliance, my family chose to view my life as completely empty. In their minds, because I didn't have a spouse or a massive mortgage, my time was inherently worthless. They engineered a deeply manipulative family narrative. Julian was the brilliant, hardworking provider who deserved every luxury and a completely stress-free path to the top. And I was the lonely, available sibling who owed them my youth and my energy. I loved my niece and nephew fiercely, and my family weaponized that love against me, turning my natural kindness into a tool for my own exploitation. For a long time, I let them do it because I was still begging for the crumbs of an affection they were never going to give me. But the occasional weekend favors were about to morph into an aggressive, organized expectation that would push me to the very edge of my sanity. The pattern of mistreatment didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, insidious creep that quickly transformed from basic family favors into an exhausting multi-year trap of uncompensated labor. Week after week, Julian and Vanessa would drop off Leo and Maya at my apartment, usually with less than an hour's notice. The frantic phone calls always followed the exact same script: a sudden emergency corporate meeting, client crisis, or a mandatory networking dinner, that was absolutely critical for Julian's career advancement. Out of a deep, genuine love for my niece and nephew, I always opened my door. I sacrificed my own weekends, canceled romantic dates at the last minute, and pulled countless stressful all-nighters just to complete my own corporate reports after the children finally fell asleep on my pull-out couch. My parents actively policed this arrangement. If I ever hesitated or if I ever dared to mention that I was overwhelmed and exhausted, my mother, Martha, would call me within minutes. She would coldly shame me, claiming I was being bitter and selfish. "Your brother is under immense pressure building a future," she would scold. "The least you can do is support his upward mobility instead of focusing on your own petty social life." But the true betrayal, the reality that finally broke my heart and shifted my perspective forever, was revealed through the very technology they used to boast. While I was at home changing Maya's diapers, cooking meals out of my own pocket because they conveniently forgot to leave grocery money, and losing sleep before my own work days, Julian and Vanessa's public social media accounts painted a vastly different picture than their panicked text messages. It started with a careless tag. A mutual friend posted a photo of Julian and Vanessa holding champagne flutes at an exclusive high-end wine tasting tour in Napa Valley. The timestamp? A Friday evening when Julian had explicitly texted me that he was trapped in a make-or-break merger meeting and desperately needed me to keep the kids overnight. Then came the photos of them at luxury country club galas, weekend couples spa resorts, and exclusive yacht parties. I remember sitting on my living room floor helping Leo with a school project, while my phone vibrated with a notification showing Vanessa getting a hot stone massage. The sheer audacity was suffocating. Every time they picked the kids up, Vanessa would sigh heavily, rubbing her temples, complaining about how draining the corporate grind was, while smelling faintly of expensive resort eucalyptus. They weren't working late to build an empire. They were actively lying to my face, dumping their responsibilities onto my shoulders, and using me as free childcare to live a lavish lifestyle. The emotional exploitation had crossed a line into a calculated, ongoing financial scam. And they had picked the absolute wrong woman to defraud. What my family completely failed to realize was that my quiet nature did not equate to ignorance or weakness. Because I didn't brag or demand attention, they assumed my career in corporate compliance was just a boring, low-level desk job, something involving pushing papers and filing mindless memos. In reality, I was a highly successful senior asset investigator for a major national firm. My entire professional life was dedicated to forensic data analysis, tracking fraudulent corporate structures, and finding the hidden money that liars thought they had successfully buried. I possessed an exceptional, highly trained eye for documentation, legal verification, and building undeniable paper trails. The moment I discovered Julian and Vanessa were systematically lying to secure free childcare while funding a luxury lifestyle, my professional instincts overrode my familial compliance. A lesser person might have screamed, cried, or caused a massive tearful scene at the next family dinner. I didn't do any of that. I knew that confronting narcissists without hard, irrefutable proof only leads to gaslighting and denial. So I quietly went to work. I opened a secure encrypted tracking database using my own registered independent consulting LLC. For 5 long years, I meticulously logged every single minute they left Leo and Maya in my care. It became a daily routine. I cataloged every meal I paid for out of pocket, every mile driven for emergency school drop-offs when Vanessa claimed she was stuck in traffic, and every single overnight stay. But the true masterpiece of my ledger was the cross-referencing. For every childcare entry I attached digital evidence. On the left side of the file, I saved screenshots of Julian's frantic text messages begging for help due to mandatory overtime. On the right side I attached the public social media check-ins, location tags, and tagged photos showing them at luxury events during those exact hours. I ensured that every single drop-off request was confirmed in writing via text, intentionally replying with phrases like, "I am confirming I will watch the children from 6 p.m. Friday to 10 a.m. Saturday," forcing them to acknowledge the exact hours of my service. I was secretly building an ironclad fortress of evidence, a legally binding digital ledger that documented an implied contract of professional care. I was shifting the balance of power entirely without my family's knowledge. Every time my mother called to insult my lack of ambition, and every time Julian smugly handed off his kids to go drink expensive wine, I just smiled warmly and added another line to the invoice. The scapegoat wasn't just surviving, she was keeping receipts. The only question was what inevitable arrogant mistake would finally push me to pull the trigger and serve them the bill. Every hero needs an anchor, and mine was Aunt Sylvia, my father's older sister. Sylvia was a fiercely independent, highly successful real estate and contract attorney who had gone completely no contact with my parents over a decade ago. She had reached her breaking point after witnessing years of my parents' toxic golden child worshipping behavior, refusing to allow their manipulation into her peaceful life. Yet, despite cutting ties with them, Sylvia had quietly maintained a close, loving relationship with me, acting as my professional mentor and emotional rock. She was the only person in my family who truly saw me. One rainy Saturday afternoon, feeling completely hollowed out by another weekend of forced childcare, I sat in Sylvia's sunlit kitchen and opened my laptop. With a trembling hand, I showed her the encrypted compliance database I had been building. I braced myself, half expecting her to tell me I was being petty or dramatic. Instead, Sylvia put on her reading glasses, scrolled through the itemized hours, cross-referenced the luxury vacation screenshots, and looked up at me with immense professional pride shining in her eyes. "Elena, this isn't just a personal diary," she said, her tone sharp and validating. "This is an ironclad documentation of an implied contract for professional care under state guidelines. They requested services in writing, you provided them, and they intentionally misrepresented their financial necessity to avoid payment." Sylvia didn't just sympathize with my pain, she helped me weaponize my compliance skills. Over the next few hours, she guided me in formatting the raw data into a legally binding, commercially structured corporate invoice, complete with a registered LLC header, standard metropolitan late fees, and a formal net 30 payment demand. She validated the years of silent agony I had buried, assuring me that setting this boundary wasn't an act of malice, but an act of absolute self-preservation. However, as she handed me back my laptop, her face grew serious. She left me with a vital warning that echoed in my mind for weeks. Toxic families always escalate their psychological abuse right before they are exposed. Keep adding to the ledger, stay completely calm, and wait for the perfect moment to present it. That inevitable escalation arrived 3 months later when Julian received a massive executive promotion at his firm. My parents treated the announcement like a royal coronation, immediately organizing a lavish celebratory banquet at an incredibly upscale restaurant downtown. They invited our entire extended family, wealthy neighborhood socialites, and several of Julian's upper management colleagues to witness his grand ascension. True to form, 3 days before the banquet, Vanessa sent me a casual, entitled text message. "Hey Elena, big night on Thursday. We're dropping Leo and Maya off at your place by 5 p.m. so Julian and I can celebrate completely stress-free without paying a professional nanny agency. Make sure you feed them dinner before bed. Thanks." Any other day I might have swallowed my pride, but this specific Thursday coincided with the absolute pinnacle of my own career. After months of grueling evaluation, I had been selected for a final, presentation-heavy interview panel for a global director position within my firm. The role required my absolute focus, an intense 4-hour morning presentation, and a 6 a.m. flight the very next morning. For the first time in 5 long years, I took a deep breath, remembered Aunt Sylvia's words, and firmly texted back, "No, I am unavailable. I have a major career milestone of my own that evening and a flight the next morning." The reaction from my family was instantaneous, coordinated, and utterly savage. Within 10 minutes, my phone erupted with venomous calls from my mother and enraged texts from Julian. Martha screamed into the receiver, accusing me of being a bitter, ungrateful daughter who was trying to sabotage her brother's special night out of pure, pathetic professional jealousy. When I refused to back down, Julian sent a text that cut straight to the bone. "Your little desk job isn't a career, Elena. Don't pretend your life is too busy for family. You will show up at the restaurant briefly to hand over the expensive congratulatory gift Mom picked out for you to buy me, smile for the corporate photos, and then you will take the kids back to your apartment so we can enjoy our night. Stop being selfish." They didn't care about my career, my sleep, or my future. To them, my life only existed to serve Julian's comfort. I stood in my apartment, staring at the screen, feeling the final threads of familial guilt snap completely. I texted back a simple, robotic confirmation that I would attend the dinner to deliver the gift. They thought they had successfully bullied me into submission once again. They had no idea I was walking into that restaurant holding the digital match that would burn their entire illusion to the ground. The restaurant they chose for Julian's celebration was an oppressive display of wealth. All crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, and waiters in tailored vests. I arrived wearing a sharp, professional navy blazer, the very one I intended to wear for my global director interview the following morning. In my hands, I carried a heavy, beautifully wrapped box containing the high-end espresso machine my mother had ordered me to buy for Julian. I intended to fulfill my promise, drop off the gift, offer a polite congratulations, and immediately leave to prepare for my flight. But my family had engineered a completely different narrative for the evening. The moment I walked toward the long banquet table, which was crowded with my extended family, wealthy neighbors, and several senior executives from Julian's firm, the ambient chatter died down. My mother, Martha, didn't welcome me with a smile. Instead, she stood up from her chair, intentionally scraping it against the marble floor to draw everyone's attention. She projected her voice across the entire dining room. "Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," my mother said, her tone dripping with theatrical disappointment. "We weren't sure if your incredibly busy schedule would allow you to support your brother for even 10 minutes, Elena." I froze, the heavy gift box pressing into my palms. "Mom, I told you I have a major interview in the morning. I'm just here to drop off the gift and—" "An interview for what, another middle management desk job?" Julian interrupted with a loud, condescending laugh. He turned directly to the managing director sitting next to him, shaking his head. "You'll have to excuse my little sister, Greg. She's always struggled with a bit of professional jealousy. When you don't have a spouse, children, or a real career to manage, I guess you have to make up emergencies to feel important." The table erupted into polite, uncomfortable chuckles. Vanessa, sitting beside Julian in a designer dress, snickered loudly into her wine glass. "Honestly, Elena, you're so detached from this family. Maybe we should start charging you an admission fee just for the privilege of spending time with our beautiful children. At least then you'd have an incentive to show up for the people who actually matter." I stood beneath the burning glare of 50 total strangers, the sting of their public cruelty radiating through my chest. For years I had shrunk myself to make them feel larger. I had swallowed my pride, hidden my successes, and allowed them to treat me like a disposable commodity just to keep the peace. But as I looked at my mother's cold eyes, Julian's arrogant smirk, and Vanessa's mocking smile, the painful fog of filial guilt vanished. A profound, icy calm washed over me. I quietly walked forward, set the heavy gift box down on the table, and looked each of them in the eye. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I simply turned on my heel and walked out of the restaurant in absolute, dignified silence, leaving their whispers fading behind me. My obligation to these people was permanently dead. The moment the heavy glass doors of the restaurant closed behind me, the cool night air hit my face and I felt lighter than I had in a decade. I drove straight back to my apartment with absolute clarity of purpose. The emotional vulnerability that had kept me trapped in their cycle of manipulation was entirely gone, replaced by the razor-sharp, calculating precision of a senior asset investigator. I sat down at my desk, still wearing my interview blazer, and opened my laptop. It was time to finalize the database I had spent 5 years meticulously maintaining. For the next 4 hours I worked with methodical focus. I pulled up the comprehensive log sheets of every weekend, holiday, and overnight shift I had covered for Julian and Vanessa. I didn't guess or estimate. I used standard market rate analytics for specialized short notice and overnight nanny services within our specific metropolitan zip code. I calculated the base hourly rate, applied standard time-and-a-half multipliers for federal holidays, and factored in itemized reimbursements for meals, gas, and school activities I had funded out of my own pocket. Then I compiled the digital appendix, the undeniable proof that would prevent any attempt at gaslighting. On the left side of each page, I embedded screenshots of Julian and Vanessa's text messages pleading for help due to mandatory corporate emergencies. On the right side, I embedded their own public social media posts from those exact dates and hours. Photos of them clinking glasses at Napa Valley vineyards, lounging at luxury spa resorts, and laughing at exclusive country club galas. The contrast was stark, pathetic, and entirely fraudulent. I formatted the final document into an official, legally structured commercial invoice issued under my registered independent consulting LLC. I included corporate tax identification numbers, formal legal disclaimers, itemized late fees, and a strict net 30 payment demand. The grand total at the bottom read exactly $48,500. At 2 a.m., I emailed the complete PDF package to Aunt Sylvia for a final legal review. I closed my eyes, slept for 4 hours and went to my director interview, pouring my reclaimed confidence into a presentation that left the panel entirely captivated. When I landed back at my apartment the next afternoon, my phone lit up with an encrypted email response from Aunt Sylvia. It contained no legal edits, only a single devastating sentence. "This is an absolute compliance masterpiece, Elena. Pull the trigger and send it." My finger hovered over the trackpad. It was time to show my family exactly what happens when the scapegoat stops begging for love and starts auditing the metrics of her own exploitation. It was exactly 3:15 p.m. the following afternoon when the digital trap sprung itself. I was sitting at my kitchen counter, sipping a cup of tea, watching the extended family group chat on my laptop. This chat was a crowded digital room of over 30 people. Aunts, uncles, second cousins, and longtime family friends who had all been conditioned to praise Julian and ignore me. Julian, still riding high on the arrogance of his promotion and the public humiliation he had handed me the night before, decided it was the perfect time to show off his new wealth. He uploaded a high-resolution photo of himself and Vanessa holding a set of gold keys in front of their new $1.2 million suburban estate. Beneath it he typed, "Finally holding the keys to the kingdom." It takes a certain level of focus and solo grit to build an empire like this from scratch. Some people in this family choose to complain about being busy with minor desk jobs, but true leaders just put their heads down and produce results. Moving day is next week. The chat immediately began to fill with standard praise. My mother was already typing a flurry of heart emojis. This was my moment. My heart didn't even accelerate. A profound, cool compliance professional focus took over. With a steady hand, I uploaded the finalized PDF document titled Itemized Childcare Services and Operational Reimbursement, 2021 to 2026. Right beneath it, I dropped a secure view-only cloud link containing the neatly categorized evidence folders. Then I typed my response. "Congratulations on the new house, Julian. Since you clearly possess ample liquidity and have just bragged about your immense financial success, I expect full payment of the attached $48,500 invoice for 2,425 hours of uncompensated childcare within 30 days. Every single hour has been meticulously cross-referenced against your written text requests and your verified luxury vacation records, which are all publicly available in the attached link. My consulting LLC does not provide pro bono services to fund your lifestyle." For exactly 10 minutes, the group chat fell into a stunning absolute silence. The typing indicators would appear and then vanish. Nobody knew what to say. 30 people were simultaneously opening a document that itemized 5 years of systematic exploitation. Then the explosion occurred. My phone began to vibrate violently. My mother was the first to break the silence, spamming the chat in panicked, furious capital letters. "Elena, what is the meaning of this insanity? Demanding money from your own brother? Delete this filth immediately. You are embarrassing this family." But it was already too late. The extended relatives had opened the cloud link. They weren't looking at my invoice, they were looking at the evidence. Cousin Sarah typed, "Wait. Julian, you texted Elena that Vanessa was in the hospital with a medical emergency on August 12th, but your own public Instagram tag shows you guys were at a VIP concert in Miami that night? Wow." Then Uncle Marcus chimed in, "Nearly $50,000 in free labor? Richard, Martha, how could you let this happen?" Before Julian or my parents could fabricate a single lie to gaslight the chat, Aunt Sylvia dropped the final, devastating anchor into the conversation. She typed, "I have personally reviewed the documentation and the written text exchanges. This constitutes a legally valid implied contract for professional services under state law. If Julian fails to settle this invoice with Elena's LLC within 30 days, I will gladly represent her pro bono in a formal civil suit. I suggest you find a good defense attorney, nephew." The power dynamic didn't just shift, it completely shattered. The golden child's illusion of solo grit was decimated in front of everyone who mattered to him. The shockwave of that digital confrontation didn't stop within the boundaries of our family group chat. In his desperate need for constant professional validation, Julian had made a fatal tactical error a few weeks prior. He had added his managing director, Greg, and 2 senior vice presidents from his corporate firm to the extended family group chat so they could see the glowing praise and family support network surrounding his promotion. They saw absolutely everything. They saw the itemized invoice. They saw the airtight forensic evidence. Most importantly, they saw the undeniable proof that Julian had repeatedly lied about mandatory corporate emergencies and critical client mergers to escape his own parental duties. To a high-level corporate firm, chronic dishonesty and fabricating company crises is a massive liability. The very next morning, Julian was called into a private meeting with HR and the compliance board. The firm immediately launched an internal ethics review, freezing his newly announced executive promotion pending investigation. A man who cannot be trusted with his own sister cannot be trusted with millions of dollars in corporate assets. The fallout within the family structure was equally severe. The extended family completely fractured. The aunts, uncles, and cousins who had spent years treating me like the distant, lonely scapegoat began calling and texting my phone, not to scold me but to offer tearful apologies. They were utterly disgusted by the sheer, calculated scale of the manipulation exposed in that cloud link. Julian and Vanessa suddenly found themselves hit with massive social isolation. They were quietly uninvited from upcoming summer barbecues and the annual family holiday gatherings. Without my free labor, Julian and Vanessa were forced to face the harsh, unvarnished reality of their true financial situation. They were heavily leveraged by credit card debt, luxury car leases, and the staggering, predatory mortgage on their new $1.2 million home. They could no longer afford a professional nanny agency, and their weekends of champagne tours were abruptly replaced by the stressful, frantic reality of actual parenting. My parents, Richard and Martha, suffered a devastating blow to their highly prized public reputation. Neighbors at their local country club began whispering behind their backs, having heard rumors of how they actively enabled the financial abuse of their own daughter to fund their son's fake lifestyle. Justice wasn't delivered through a chaotic, dramatic screaming match or childish revenge. It was delivered through the cold, natural, cascading consequences of an undeniable truth finally brought to light. In the tense weeks that followed the exposure, the predictable waves of toxic family manipulation began crashing heavily against my new boundaries. They had realized that their public image was entirely shattered, and like cornered animals, they cycled through every manipulative tactic in the handbook. First came the furious, threatening voicemails from my father, Richard. His voice rattled through the speaker of my phone, deep with an unearned rage. He claimed that I was an ungrateful, malicious child who had brought nothing but shame to his house. He threatened to disown me permanently and ensure that I would never receive a single dime of inheritance if I didn't immediately go back into the group chat, retract the invoice, and publicly declare to Julian's bosses and the family that the entire document was a poorly thought-out psychological joke. When my silence proved that threats no longer carried any power over me, the tone from their camp shifted drastically into emotional guilt-tripping. My mother, Martha, called me from an unblocked landline, weeping hysterically into the receiver. She begged me to think of the children, to save Julian's crumbling marriage and to protect his career. "Family always forgives, Elena," she whispered between artificial sobs. "We have all made mistakes, but you cannot let your own brother drown over a little bit of money." Even Vanessa tried her hand at diplomacy, sending a highly calculated, manipulative email. She offered a hollow, conditional apology for the misunderstandings at the restaurant, before subtly asking if we could negotiate a family discount to settle the matter quietly before Aunt Sylvia filed formal paperwork. I listened to their desperate ploys with a detached, mature calmness that surprised even myself. The childhood version of me would have succumbed to the guilt, but the woman standing here today felt absolutely nothing. Guided by Aunt Sylvia's sharp legal counsel, I refused to engage in their theatrical drama. I responded exclusively in writing with a single unyielding statement: "All future communication regarding this matter must go through my legal representative. Do not contact me directly again." I then systematically blocked their numbers, email domains, and social media profiles, cutting off their access to my life permanently. 6 months after my invoice went viral, my life had transformed into a masterpiece of genuine peace, structural stability, and emotional freedom. The internal panel for the global director position had been completely blown away by my interview, and I officially secured the promotion. The new role came with a substantial salary increase, a corporate leadership title, and a beautiful relocation package to a vibrant, sunlit city hundreds of miles away from my family's toxic shadow. Julian's lawyer had scrambled desperately behind the scenes to avoid a public civil lawsuit that would have permanently destroyed what was left of Julian's corporate reputation. They quietly agreed to an out-of-court settlement, paying my consulting LLC the full $48,500 plus legal fees. Combined with my new executive salary, I used those funds to purchase a stunning modern condo overlooking the city skyline. A bright, open space that belongs entirely to me, completely free from the suffocating weight of unappreciated labor. This past Thanksgiving marked the first time in my adult life that I didn't spend the holidays acting as an unpaid cook and domestic servant in my parents' kitchen while Julian watched television on the couch. Instead, I hosted my very first holiday dinner in my new home, surrounded by my true chosen family. Aunt Sylvia sat at the head of the table, joined by supportive professional colleagues and genuine, deeply loyal friends who value me for my character, not for what they can extract from me. As I looked around the room at the smiling faces and listened to the warm, authentic laughter echoing against the glass walls of my condo, I felt a deep, quiet warmth settle into my chest. I no longer carry the painful, exhausting burden of trying to earn the love of people who only saw my kindness as a resource to be mined. My victory wasn't found in watching Julian struggle with his debt, nor was it found in the professional freezing of his career. My true victory lay in the quiet, profound realization that my self-worth is entirely non-negotiable. I stopped begging for a seat at a toxic table, built my own empire from the ground up, and walked gracefully into a future defined entirely by my own dignity, peace, and unshakable boundaries.